Why does Joni Lamb feel the need to remove Laura Lynn's widely shared interview from the internet so strongly? What was mentioned that caused a demand for a takedown right away? In a startling development, Joni is making a concerted effort to stop a discussion that is going viral on the internet. However, it might be too late already. Questions are raised as the video goes viral. Is she attempting to conceal something or prevent the truth from becoming known? Watch it now before it goes away. Forever. One interview was the beginning of it all. Just two women sitting down to talk. No dramatic music. No headlines about breaking news. Debbie Lenhard was asked to speak candidly about something she felt had been ignored by Laura Lynn, a Canadian journalist who is renowned for saying what others won't. Debbie arrived ready. She wasn't there to stir things up or engage in gossip. What was being referred to as a forensic study into a man named Pete deeply troubled her. However, from it was immediately apparent that this would not be another interview as soon as she opened her mouth. Debbie talked coolly. However, her words struck a deep chord. She reported several contradictory accounts, odd delays, and missing paperwork. It didn't feel like a proper investigation at all, she said, despite what had been made public. She wasn't merely accusatory. People stopped and asked, was something being hidden? And if so, by whom? When she outlined a pattern, the interview quickly went viral within hours of going live. It initially appeared on minor channels and in secret Facebook groups. Next came the re-uploads on other platforms, the YouTube videos, and the tweets. In Christian circles, WhatsApp conversations exploded. Faith TV drama was no longer the only genre. People were describing this as explosive, possibly even dangerous. Everybody had a viewpoint. Some praised Debbie's courage for speaking up out. She was going too far, according to others. However, people were observing, conversing, and sharing regardless of their stance. It was all over. Laura Lynn, who'd held plenty of daring discussions, knew this one would be controversial. Even she was surprised by what happened next, though. Online trolls weren't the only ones causing the backlash. It came from a legitimate authority figure. Daystar television network co-founder Joni Lamb, a key player in. According to reports, religious media was incensed. She didn't only make a comment or tweet, she immediately contacted her legal counsel and lodged a formal complaint with YouTube, requesting that the video be removed. She described it as damaging, defamatory, and misleading. Furthermore, it was more than just a contentious video in her opinion. It was a danger not only to Pete, but also to Daystar's reputation and the credibility she had worked so hard to establish over the years. This wasn't merely regarding a man's name. It had to do with the perception of a whole ministry. Laura Lynn, however, was not taken by surprise. She had previously taken action to ensure that the footage would not simply vanish. The interview was replicated on 8 various platforms, including Rumble, Telegram, BitChute, Vimeo, and more, before YouTube ever got the takedown notice. The video was here to stay, even if YouTube gave in. Things really took off at that point. What began as a one-time interview turned into a conflict over authority, free speech, and censorship. The substance was no longer the only topic of discussion. They were debating who has the authority to determine what is permitted on the internet. Was Joni suppressing or defending the truth? Was Laura the only one with the courage to pose genuine questions, or was she being careless? The actual questions remained unresolved as the dust continued to rise. What took place during the alleged investigation? Why were certain items absent? Why didn't Pete say anything? Perhaps most significantly, when it's difficult to discern the truth, who do we trust? This was no longer merely a viral video. No one, including Joni, Laura, and the platforms hosting the video, had complete influence over the course of the full-blown media maelstrom. Over the years, Joni Lamb had experienced a great deal. After enduring personal, professional, and spiritual adversities, she transformed Daystar Television into one of the largest worldwide networks of Christians. She came across to her audience as a woman who remained steadfast in her beliefs. a leader they could trust, and a voice of calm. However, something changed in her when she noticed the now famous interview between Laura Lynn and Debbie Lenhard become more popular online. This was not another moment on the internet. It felt like a direct assault to Joni, and she was not going to take it lying down. It was a whisper at first. Her media team member forwarded. The message said, "You might want to see this," and sent her the link. With a single click, it was there. Laura calmly deconstructs what they described as a forensic inquiry involving a man named Pete, while seated across from Debbie. Joni was immediately drawn to more than simply the subject, though. The tone was the problem. They didn't pose inquiries. They were asserting things, large ones, argues that if thought to be capable of causing actual harm. Joni listened, becoming more uncomfortable by the minute. Debbie discussed unreliable timings, missing records, and unresolved questions. Although Daystar was not specifically mentioned, it was clear who was being mentioned and, more significantly, who was being implicated. Pete wasn't merely a nameless character in Christian media. In front of tens of thousands of people and counting, his name was being dragged through the mud. Joni had worked with him, supported him, and perhaps even shielded him. Joni convened a meeting with her core staff, legal counsel, public relations specialists, and close friends the following morning. In the boardroom, she replayed the video. There was silence for a time. "This could get worse," someone finally said, and they were correct. Telegram, Twitter, Facebook, and other platforms like Rumble and BitChute were immediately sharing clips of the interview. Reactions were pouring in, and hashtags were emerging. Despite never being specifically stated, Joni's name was starting to be thrown into the fray as people were picking sides. Some accused her of being complicit, while others claimed she was hiding something. The fact that no one had any concrete evidence was irrelevant. Perception is crucial in the realm of viral media, and it was rapidly changing. This wasn't simply PR for Joni. It was intimate. This was her reputation, her platform, and her mission. Furthermore, she believed that more than simply her personal name was being questioned. The integrity of Daystar, a network established to disseminate the gospel, and currently utilized as a background for rumors and uncertainty. That was not something she could let happen. She told her lawyers to move quickly. YouTube received a take-down request. According to the allegation, the film was damaging, false, and defamatory. It misrepresented the truth, arbitrarily singled out those who were unable to defend themselves, and presented an incomplete picture. It was more than just completing legal paperwork, but it went too far. Behind the scenes, Joni started phoning reliable community speakers, religious leaders, and other media personalities. She wasn't yelling. She was composed, clear, and focused. "This is dangerous," she reminded them. Naturally, not everyone agreed. Some believed she was exaggerating, while others muttered that attempting to remove the video would merely increase its popularity. Not just for me, for all of us, if we let this kind of content spread unchallenged. Who's next? One expert cautioned about the Streisand effect, saying that the more you try to hide it, the more people want to see it. "Let them look," Joni answered, without flinching, "but not on my platforms or on my watch." Laura Lynn stepped up in the meanwhile, posting updates stating that the video had been mirrored to other platforms and that she would not be silenced. Her supporters applauded her for confronting major Christian media, portraying her as a truth-teller, a whistleblower, and someone who didn't hesitate to poke the giant. To them, Joni Lamb represented the establishment, and the establishment was terrified. However, Joni was motivated by conviction rather than fear, and she honestly thought the interview was reckless, feeling it created division among believers, opened the door to dangerous speculation, and fostered gossip. In private conversations, she likened it to spiritual warfare. This is a test," she said softly to a companion one evening. "Not a ferocious public outburst, but a measured response, something that addressed the controversy, without giving it more oxygen than it deserved." But she kept returning to one thing as she wrote each line. Silence could be misconstrued. People would assume she was hiding if she spoke too little. She might unwittingly confirm things if she spoke too much, weren't even accurate. She so chose to pray instead. Employees observed that she was spending more time alone in her office. She consulted reputable pastors for spiritual guidance. She prayed to God for serenity, knowledge, and clarity. She pleaded, "Lord, please don't let me fight this with anger. Let me use the truth to combat it." Joni's actions in the days that followed were more powerful than any press statement. In private, she strengthened Daystar's rules about content. Her follow-up documentation was sent to YouTube. She let her court documents speak for her instead of mentioning Laura Lynn by name. And she began screening everyone behind closed doors. Contributors, hosts, and producers. She wanted to make sure it wouldn't happen again if a single interview could cause such a commotion. Nevertheless, the narrative persisted. It caught on with other creators. Videos of commentators' reactions to the original clip were created. People started making assumptions about Pete's true identity. He was defended by some. Others called for clarification. But Joni persevered despite it all. She never once reacted angrily in public. She didn't make any ambiguous subtweets. There was no venting on air from her. She simply persisted in steadily and quietly constructing a response that would safeguard her mission and legacy. Some people claim that she is out of touch. Some claim that she is acting like any other leader would. But regardless of what individuals may believe, one thing is certain. Joni Lamb is not going to back down. She believes in the platform she helped create, not because she's scared. She thinks it serves a purpose. And she won't allow one interview, whether it goes viral or not, to undo all of her hard work. This battle isn't about ego for her. It has to do with stewardship, pertaining to protecting the area where millions of believers come for hope, worship, and encouragement. And she's willing to take the fall for doing what she thinks is right. Because Joni Lamb is standing up for a calling rather than just a name. It used to feel like the Wild West on the internet. Open, erratic, and largely out of control. Anyone with a message on their smartphone might be heard. The promise was that. The dream was that. However, at some point, things began to change. New norms, new lines, and an old debate in new clothes came along with the explosion of audiences and the expansion of platforms. Who has the authority to determine what goes down and what stays up? Never has that question felt more relevant than it does right now, particularly in light of Laura Lynn's widely shared interview and Joni Lamb's determined efforts to remove it. What began as a single exchange between two individuals evolved into a far more significant conflict between the right to free speech and the responsibilities that accompany it. YouTube, a platform that many creators rely on to express their voices, and that many others now accuse of favoritism, is caught in the middle and has a lot of impact. The interview between Laura and Debbie didn't first appear to be particularly risky. It was only a lengthy discussion laced with doubts, worries, and sharp questions over a purported forensic investigation. However, it quickly became apparent that this was no typical video when the footage started making the rounds on Facebook, Twitter, Telegram, Rumble, and other platforms. People were responding quickly and loudly. While some were relieved, others were furious. Everyone was observing, but at last someone expressed what they were thinking. The reply from Joni Lamb followed. It was deemed derogatory by her, detrimental. According to her, it might harm the reputations of the ministry she dedicated her life to establishing, as well as the person in question. In other words, she did what anyone in her situation would do. She requested that YouTube take it down. The old argument suddenly reappeared with a bang. Laura Lynn's supporters simply viewed it as censorship. They thought Joni was attempting to stifle unpleasant facts, since they didn't align with her well-cultivated public persona. For them, this had nothing to do with false information. It has to do with control. When things start to slide out of Their control. The gatekeepers do what they always do. They shut it down. The powerful are protecting the powerful. Others, however, witnessed it in a different way. They viewed it as an act of integrity rather than ego protection. They maintained that websites like YouTube had an obligation to prevent the dissemination of unsubstantiated or possibly harmful claims, particularly when those allegations have the power to ruin someone's reputation with just one click. What Laura did, they maintained, was not journalism. Without any accountability or fact-checking, it was conjecture broadcast in front of a worldwide audience. That's the crux of the problem. There are many who think that thoughts should be freely exchanged on the internet, uncensored, untidy, and unpolished. On the other hand, there are many who feel that this freedom entails a moral duty to double-check, use caution, and reconsider before publishing. Naturally, YouTube occupies an odd intermediate position. It is now more than just a tech platform. It's a battlefield of cultures. And every choice it makes, everything it removes, everything it demonetizes, everything it promotes and conveys a message to all viewers, not just creators. YouTube had an option when Joni's team filed their takedown request. Take down the video to avoid a furor. Let it go and run the danger of legal repercussions. There isn't a simple solution. There is risk associated with each choice. Every result contributes to someone's story. Meanwhile, the movie continues to be viewed on BitChute, Telegram, Rumble, and even downloaded and reposted by unidentified accounts. That's the truth of today. Anything that is posted online is permanent. You're always playing catch-up, no matter how hard you try to erase it, bury it, or hush it. The system will never be able to keep up with the crowd. This is the reason why today's censorship discussion is so complex. We no longer have to deal with a single gatekeeper, network, or newspaper. Millions of voices, 1,000 platforms, and algorithms that no one really understands recognizes. And in the midst of all that confusion, we're attempting to define what truth is. Yes, Joni Lamb's actions caused criticism, but they also spurred a crucial discussion. It's not just about Pete, Daystar, or the video. It's also about how our culture defines appropriate speech, about whether transparency truly exists when platforms may be pressured behind the scenes to make things disappear, and about where the line is between preserving reputations and concealing the truth. For Laura, it's a warning to Lynn and her followers. They witness the strength that a person like Joni possesses. Because of her institutional weight, as well as her viewership, they observe how quickly a video can be deemed dangerous and removed before anyone has had a chance to view it. And they question whether we could experience this as well. What else are we missing? It's a line in the sand for Joni. They consider unbridled speculating to be destructive, that it is risky to let everyone with a camera and a microphone to make unfounded accusations against others. They don't consider this to be silence. They consider it protective. This isn't about censorship, they claim. It has to do with norms. Here's the unsettling reality, though. Both viewpoints are correct and incorrect. Because whether or not one video should be taken down isn't the true problem. The true problem is that we now live in a world where influence, indignation, and truth all vie for the same place. And we're still unsure on how to handle that. What does that leave us with then? More transparency, according to some, is the solution. Platforms ought to be transparent about the standards they're using, who asked for the removal, and why. Others think decentralization is the solution. Create more websites similar to Rumble, where a video cannot be taken down for no reason, because it causes discomfort to someone. Then there are those who think that personal accountability is the only viable approach. That platforms, viewers, and producers must all slow down, ask more questions, and put in the effort to separate what is real from what is just noise. One thing is certain, regardless of the response. There will be more videos that raise a stir than this one. The takedown request won't be the final one. We will all continue to be compelled to consider who has the authority to determine what is true, who's in charge, and who is keeping an eye on them. Because this story ultimately involved more than one interview. It has to do with something more significant. It was about the people we follow, the platforms we trust, and the unseen forces that influence what we see and don't see daily. And perhaps that's what we should all be focusing on more. Nobody can truly predict what will occur next. That's the peculiar aspect of tales like as this. It's not a clean ending. Things simply linger rather than have a clear winner, a spectacular courtroom finish, or a tidy closure where someone declares, "Here's the truth." And that is precisely where this story is at the moment. Poised in midair, encircled by inquiries that nobody is yet prepared to address. The interview, the one that ignited the fire, comes first. There was no sense of urgency in Laura Lynn's talk with Debbie Lenhard.bomb first. Just two ladies conversed, one asking questions, and the other imparting what she believed to be her knowledge. However, that video became far more significant after it went viral. For some, it became a menace, but for others it became a symbol of truth. People are now keeping an eye on it to see what will happen. Will YouTube ultimately remove it? Under pressure, will other platforms do the same? Or will the floating mirrored copies? Regardless of the take-own requests, does the internet keep it alive? This does not have a roadmap. It's almost impossible to retrieve content once it's gone into the digital wild. That is the dual-edged nature of contemporary media. Freedom implies that nothing is ever completely removed. Next up is Joni Lamb. She has stated her stance clearly. The video is dangerous. It goes too far. She asserts that it is not about stifling voices. It's about maintaining confidence and safeguarding individuals. However, her detractors don't believe it. They believe she is stifling awkward inquiries by abusing her position and power. She now has an option. She has several options: intensify the altercation, take legal action, strengthen her public position, or stand aside and let it end peacefully. Will she say something? Will she disclose what actually transpired behind the scenes? Or will she hold off to see which direction the before moving? Does the public wind blow? Clarity is what her supporters desire. Those who doubt her want responsibility. However, there has been a lot of silence and conjecture thus far. Laura Lynn, meantime, is also at a turning point. Without a doubt, she has received the attention. Her following has expanded. Perhaps millions, if not thousands, have seen her interview. However, she must now choose how to handle that momentum. Does she try to expand the story? Or does she delve further, publish additional interviews, make more allegations, or make more behind-the-scenes disclosures? A discussion about the role of the media in the religious community, transparency, and censorship. Some others believe she ought to invite Pete, the subject of the interview, to appear on her program. Let him talk. Let him answer. Others advise her to wait, collect more proof, and carefully consider her next course of action. The following phase will determine how people remember her, regardless of her choice. Not only as a broadcaster, but also as a participant in a broader cultural discussion. And then there's Pete, the one name that, despite the fact that he hasn't spoken, nobody can stop talking about. He is incredibly silent. Is he getting ready to make a statement? Is he speaking with attorneys? Is he simply for the storm to blow over? Nobody knows at the moment. And that ambiguity merely adds fuel to the fire. People are looking for answers. The more Pete remains silent, the more the mystery is revealed. But they want someone to come forward and say, "Here's what happened." We must not overlook the audience, of course. Those on the sidelines, reloading their feeds, replaying the interview, and debating in the comments as all of this is happening. Some people are incensed, some are perplexed, and some are only interested. But they're all asking the identical query: who is being honest? That is the most difficult aspect of the entire narrative. Facts are no longer the only consideration. It has to do with trust. Perception is key. It's about the hazy line that separates right from wrong, free speech from slander, and shielding people from being exposed. and it's difficult to obtain answers in that area. What comes next, then? Perhaps nothing. Perhaps the story fades and is replaced by the next scandal. The internet operates in this manner. Quick, unrelenting, and insatiably curious. Perhaps something more significant is sparked by the story. Perhaps it sparks fresh discussions about responsibility in Christian media. Perhaps it compels websites like YouTube to be more open. Perhaps it forces content producers to reconsider their publishing decisions or motivates them to keep pushing the envelope. We simply don't know, and that's the reality. Most people are reluctant to confess. Everybody wants a tidy finish, a satisfying resolution, and a time when everything makes sense. However, that is not how actual life operates, particularly not on the internet. Not right now in particular. Like so many stories in our digital era, this one will most likely continue to develop in whispers or in headlines, either quietly or loudly, and when the time comes, we'll see that it wasn't about a single video, individual, or platform. It has to do with something more profound, something that we are all still trying to understand. We can only observe, wait, and continue to ask questions till then.